This content is produced by PASS, the CSLB, an independent audio-first study companion for busy California B General candidates. I build these lessons from official CSLB study guide topics and reputable source-backed California materials, so you can study on the go. This is exam prep reinforcement, not legal, professional, engineering, or job-specific advice. Exam content is set by PSI and the CSLB and may change, so always verify current requirements against official CSLB materials. No exam outcome is guaranteed. Now let's get into it. This episode covers hidden conditions, site walkthroughs, and pre-bid risk, including general building scope limits, underground utilities, the 24-inch tolerance zone, moisture clues, cracks, asbestos red flags, pre-1979 buildings, and the 2025 California OSHA lead limits of 2 micrograms per cubic meter for the action level and 10 micrograms per cubic meter for the permissible exposure limit. This matters because a bid is not just a price. A bid is where a contractor decides which risks are known, which risks are unknown, and which risks should never be guessed at. I want you to think of the pre-bid walkthrough as a quiet investigation, not dramatic, not theatrical, just disciplined. A good contractor walks into a building and sees more than rooms, walls, doors, and finishes. I see clues, I see watermarks, patched cracks, floor slopes, old ceiling texture, suspicious resilient flooring, utility paint, and places where the story of the building does not match the story the owner is telling. The general building contractor is allowed to coordinate a broad project, but that does not mean the license is a magic key for every trade and every hazard. The safe exam prep rule is this: a general building prime project normally needs 2 or more unrelated building trades or crafts, unless the project is framing or carpentry. Fire protection and well drilling stay in their own controlled lanes unless the proper specialty license or properly licensed subcontractor is involved. A single trade job is where people get trapped. A general building license is broad, but it is not a loophole for taking only roofing, only plumbing, only electrical, or only hazardous abatement and pretending it is a full building project. Looking at this first chart, I want you to see the decision as a gate. If the project uses 2 or more unrelated trades, the gate may open for a general building contractor. If the job is framing or carpentry, that is a special exception. But if the job is one non-framing trade, the gate closes unless the proper specialty classification is in place. The memory aid is simple. 2 trades open the gate. Framing has its own gate. One other trade needs the specialty key. That matters during a walkthrough because the first hidden risk is sometimes not in the wall. It is in the contract. A kitchen remodel with demolition, framing repair, drywall, plumbing, electrical coordination, cabinets, and finishes is very different from a job that is only removing old floor tile or only replacing a roof. I want you to separate construction coordination from license overreach. On a real project, that protects the owner, the workers, and the contractor. In exam prep, it keeps you from choosing an answer that sounds practical in the field, but violates the licensing boundary. Now I want to move into the physical walk. I call this the first pass, second pass method. On the first pass, I look broadly: site access, drainage direction, neighboring structures, overhead lines, utility markings, age of the building, slopes and flatwork, places where water would want to travel. On the second pass, I slow down and look for fingerprints, stains, white powder, diagonal cracks, racked doors, patched stucco, mismatched flooring, fresh paint only in one corner. A contractor who only measures square footage can miss the actual job. This chart gives you the 6 big red flags I want in your head: poor drainage, efflorescence, settlement clues, asbestos suspect materials, lead paint risk, and buried utility exposure. Do not turn those clues into a diagnosis you are not licensed or qualified to make. Turn them into documentation, questions, contingencies, and referrals. That distinction is important. If I see diagonal cracks radiating from a window corner, I am not announcing a structural engineering conclusion. I am documenting observed cracking and recommending evaluation by the proper professional before final price, final scope, or final method. If I see old acoustic ceiling texture in a 1974 house, I am not licking my finger, rubbing the ceiling, and declaring asbestos. I am treating it as suspect material until testing and proper professionals establish what it is. A good pre-bid note sounds boring, and boring is beautiful. For example, observed white powder deposit on interior face of masonry wall near lower grade side. Recommend moisture investigation before finish repair pricing. That note protects everyone better than a brave guess. The bid should not inherit a hidden condition for free, just because nobody wanted to slow down and name it. Moisture is one of the best teachers on a site walk because water leaves a trail. The California residential drainage rule used in this lesson is a minimum fall of 6 inches within the first 10 feet away from foundation walls, where site conditions allow. Impervious surfaces within 10 feet of the foundation need at least 2% slope away from the building. I do not want you to memorize those numbers like loose trivia. I want you to see what they are trying to prevent. Water is patient. It does not care about the sales meeting, the schedule, or the allowance in the estimate. If the grade sends water toward the foundation, water will sit there and look for a path. Concrete, mortar, brick, and block are not glass. They have pores. Capillary action can pull moisture through those pores, the way a paper towel pulls coffee up from a spill. As the water moves, it dissolves salts inside the masonry. When the moisture reaches a surface and evaporates, the salts stay behind as a white powder. That is efflorescence. I use a simple memory picture. Efflorescence is the building sweating salt. If you see salt, ask where the water came from. Scrubbing and painting can hide the symptom, but it does not fix the path of water. For a contractor estimating repairs, that matters because the cheap surface fix may fail again if drainage, waterproofing, vapor control, or hydrostatic pressure is the real issue. Cracks tell a different part of the story. Plastic shrinkage, cracking, can happen when fresh concrete loses surface moisture too quickly during curing. That kind of cracking can be shallow and random. Differential settlement is a different animal. Uniform settlement means the building settles more evenly. Differential settlement means one area moves differently than another because of soil-bearing differences, localized moisture, poor compaction, erosion, or load conditions. That uneven movement racks the structure. It can show as diagonal cracks from window or door corners, doors that do not close, sloping floors, or walls that look like they're being twisted. Here is the memory aid. Random hairline is a surface whisper. Diagonal racking is a structural shout. I'm not saying every diagonal crack is automatically catastrophic. I am saying it deserves respect. A general building contractor should recognize the pattern, document it, and bring in a structural or geotechnical professional when the condition is beyond ordinary trade judgment. That is the boundary. Recognize and refer. Do not pretend to engineer. Now I want to take the walkthrough outside and below the ground. California excavation rules exist because buried utilities are unforgiving. A gas line does not care that the bid was tight. A fiber line does not care that the trench looked clear. An electric line does not care that the paint mark seemed close enough. The rule in this lesson is that excavators must notify the Regional Notification Center at least 2 working days before excavation begins, not counting the date of notification. The proposed excavation area must be delineated first, commonly with white paint, flags, stakes, or whiskers. The locator marks are not a treasure map with depth. That is the trap. The marks show the approximate horizontal path. They do not guarantee exact depth. They do not reveal every bend, old repair, undocumented lateral, or abandoned line that still matters. This is why the tolerance zone exists. In California, the tolerance zone extends 24 inches on each side of the field marking placed by the operator. I want you to picture that as an invisible force field around the paint line. Inside that force field, power-driven excavation equipment does not get to charge in first. The exact location must be determined using hand tools or vacuum excavation before power equipment is used in a way that could damage the subsurface installation. The memory aid is 24 each side, hands before iron. 24 inches each side of the mark. Hand tools or vacuum excavation before the iron teeth of a trencher, backhoe, auger, or boring equipment get near the utility. This rule has a practical reason. Locating technology is useful, but it is not magic. A locator can read a signal and mark a path, but the actual line may be deeper, shallower, offset, repaired, or connected to something not shown on a plan. Hand potholing and vacuum excavation slow the job down on purpose. That slowdown is the point. It replaces blind force with visual confirmation. There is also a high priority mindset here. If excavation is near high priority subsurface installations, such as certain high pressure gas, petroleum, or high voltage electric installations, the contractor should recognize that the normal routine may not be enough, and that an on-site meeting with the facility operator may be required before digging. For exam prep, hold on to the principle, notify, delineate, respect the tolerance zone, verify exact location, then excavate with the right method. Older buildings add another layer of pre-bid risk. The trap is that old materials can look ordinary until disturbance turns them into a regulated exposure. A 1974 kitchen can look like cabinets, floor tile, acoustic texture, and painted trim. A disciplined contractor sees possible asbestos-containing materials and possible lead-containing coatings until testing says otherwise. For asbestos, the key threshold in this lesson is 100 square feet or more of asbestos-related work. At that point, the contractor needs the proper asbestos certification and registration with the Division of Occupational Safety and Health unless the work is performed by a properly qualified and registered asbestos abatement contractor. The larger remodel does not erase that threshold. You cannot hide asbestos inside a multi-trade project and pretend the hazard disappeared. This chart puts the hazardous material numbers side by side. On the asbestos side, remember the 100 square foot tripwire. Once asbestos-related work reaches that threshold, the regulatory requirements change in a serious way. On the lead side, remember the 2025 shockwave. The action level is 2 micrograms per cubic meter of air as an 8-hour time-weighted average, and the permissible exposure limit is 10 micrograms per cubic meter of air as an 8-hour time-weighted average. Those lead numbers matter because old estimating habits can be dangerous. For many years, people repeated the old 50 microgram permissible exposure limit. The updated California OSHA construction lead standard is far lower. That means work that once may have been treated casually can now require much more serious planning, exposure assessment, respiratory protection, hygiene controls, medical surveillance, and containment thinking. Trigger tasks are the common trap: manual sanding, grinding, scraping, abrasive blasting, and disturbance of lead-containing coatings can create airborne exposure fast. The contractor should not walk through an older painted structure and casually price demolition, as if the dust is just dust. Dust can be the job. Dust can be the cost. Dust can be the violation. I use 2 memory anchors here. For asbestos, 100 square feet is the tripwire. For lead, 2 and 10 are the new guardrails. 2 for the action level. 10 for the permissible exposure limit. If a bid on an older structure ignores those guardrails, the number on paper may look competitive, but the job may be underpriced before the first worker opens a door. Pre-1979 buildings deserve special attention for asbestos communication. If an owner of a building constructed before 1979 knows the building contains asbestos, California law requires written notice to employees working in the building. For the general building contractor, the practical move is to ask about surveys, reports, prior abatement, and known materials before pricing disturbance. Again, the boundary is not to diagnose. The boundary is to recognize the red flag and bring in the right process. Now I want to pull these pieces into the estimating decision. A pre-bid walkthrough should produce more than a number. It should produce a risk map. What is included? What is excluded? What requires testing? What requires a specialty contractor? What requires an engineer? What can be priced now and what should stay as an allowance or contingency until the condition is verified? Think about the hillside retaining wall example. If I see efflorescence across a masonry wall, poor drainage, and diagonal cracking near low windows, I do not just price paint, patch, and flooring. I slow down. The moisture clue suggests water movement. The diagonal cracking suggests possible differential settlement. The grade may not be sending water away from the foundation. That is not a place for heroic guessing. That is a place for written observations, photos, owner communication, and referral for the proper evaluation. Or think about the driveway trenching example. The owner wants a new water line across the front yard. It feels simple. It might be simple. But until the excavation area is delineated, the notification center is contacted, the marks are received, and the tolerance zone is respected, the true risk is not priced. A utility strike is not just a delay. It can be a life safety emergency, a service outage, a civil penalty problem, and a reputation problem. The same logic applies to old kitchens, old flooring, old ceiling texture, and old paint. If I ignore hazardous material clues during the walkthrough, the estimate becomes fiction. It may be a beautiful spreadsheet, but it is still fiction. The real job includes testing, controls, proper subcontractors, worker protection, disposal rules, and schedule impacts. A good bid does not pretend those costs are surprises when the clues were visible from the beginning. Here is my pre-bid memory phrase: see it, note it, price the process, refer the risk, see the clue. Note it clearly, price the process needed to verify or control it. Refer the risk when it crosses into engineering, environmental, or specialty territory. That phrase also helps with design and construction error identification. The exam prep skill is not just spotting what is wrong, it is choosing the responsible next action. If the grade slopes toward the foundation, the responsible action is not to paint over efflorescence. If utility marks cross the proposed trench, the responsible action is not to dig faster before anyone notices. If suspect asbestos material is present, the responsible action is not to self-perform abatement, because the remodel has other trades. If diagonal settlement clues appear, the responsible action is not to design underpinning in your head during the walkthrough. Let me give you the final review in plain language. A general building contractor has broad coordination authority, but not unlimited authority. Two unrelated trades generally support a general building prime project. Framing and carpentry have a special exception. Single, non-framing trade work needs the proper specialty lane. During a site walk, poor drainage, efflorescence, diagonal cracks, old acoustic texture, old resilient flooring, old paint, and utility markings are not background noise. They are risk signals. For drainage, remember 6 inches in 10 feet and 2% for impervious surfaces near the foundation. For efflorescence, remember sweating salt means moisture movement. For settlement, remember diagonal racking deserves professional evaluation. For excavation, remember call before digging, delineate first, give at least 2 working days, and respect the 24-inch tolerance zone on each side of the mark. For utilities, remember the paint does not give depth. For asbestos, remember the 100 square foot tripwire. For lead, remember the 20-25 numbers. 2 micrograms action level and 10 micrograms permissible exposure limit. I want you to leave this episode with a contractor's calm confidence. You do not need to pretend to know what no one can know from a surface walkthrough. You need to know what to notice, what to document, what to verify, what to exclude from a fixed price until tested, and when to bring in the proper licensed or qualified professional. That is not weakness. That is how experienced contractors stay out of bad contracts. There is an audio practice quiz for this specific episode, and I made it for this exact material. Hidden conditions, site walkthroughs, utilities, drainage, lead, asbestos, and pre-bid risk decisions. It is audio-based, so the questions are read aloud and you answer by tapping, which is built for people studying on the go, between jobs, in the truck, or wherever you can fit in a few minutes. Go to the description below this video. You will see a link that says Pass the CSLB. Tap it. It will take you straight there. And if any part of this episode raised a question from your own field experience, comment below and ask me. I read those questions as a way to make this study process more useful. Subscribe to stay on track through every episode until you get your license, and keep going. I am here with you all the way through the finish line.